Welcome to the UpKeep Pledge Pros Podcast, a podcast dedicated to UpKeep's unmatched value and unwavering support for our customers and the community at large through our new ambassador program. Today, we have the managing partner and an industry expert in the field of talent acquisition, particularly in asset-intensive and asset management companies, Chris Pepin of ProRely or Progressive Reliability. Chris, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Appreciate you having me on.
You're very welcome. We were very excited to have you. Chris and I met at SMRP, and we talked heavily on talent, filling the gaps, having appropriate training, and having the manpower and the appropriate and specified manpower to really drive our businesses forward. And it was a no-brainer to have Chris on here. As everybody knows, UpKeep just did the State of the Community, State of the Industry address, and lo and behold, manpower, filling gaps, filling jobs, and then the really looming walk out essentially of all the knowledge. All these people who've been in industry for years are retiring. So before we talk about and get into all that with Chris, can you tell us who you are and ultimately what ProRely or Progressive Reliability is?
So real quick, this is my third talent acquisition company. So the first one I was a part of, we actually had a wild ride. We grew 24,000% in 3 years.
A lot.
And they went up. I was unfortunately not one of the first two. I was number 5. Anyway, that company wound up doing very, very well and exited. I then went, that was in the healthcare space, but I learned how to grow a company fast, how to identify a talent vacuum and a market. And then the next company I did was in the IT world, so a little more closely related to you with venture-backed companies. Did a lot of recruitment there. That was a lot of hard work, a very difficult, interesting world. Wound up selling that one. And ultimately, Brian, I think any business founder, any business person really wants to find the right problem to solve. And I definitely got good at finding problems. What I've gotten better about, what I really like about where we are today is who you're solving it for. So before I get into anything about ProRely and what we stand for, I want to say, having seen a couple different markets and having worked in them, there's a respect and camaraderie within the industrial world that does not exist in those other companies and in those other places. And I've found that the heart behind people working together, these are dangerous environments, as we all know. Safety is a big, important piece, but ultimately, I think I see the bonds that are forged. I see the way people interact at conferences. It's entirely different than any place else. So just, for one thing, I want to hold up the amount of respect that I've developed for the industrial world over the last 5 years. And the next thing is, of course, we have shifts taking place on multiple fronts. So not only are we amidst a generational shift taking place just in America, we're also in a very dynamic world in terms of technology coming in terms of where people work, how people work, and then we're also dealing with, frankly, a perceived exodus of knowledge and talent that's taking place. So there's a lot going up and down, and we're excited and honored to be able to take our part in this generational shift and do, everything we can to really resolve the talent question for the companies out there that are really willing to compete and attract the best people.
Yeah. I mean, it is a massively, I don't want to say underrated, but a lot of people don't think about that as a big whole, right? I mean, yeah, in individual companies, probably like, oh my God, I really need to fill these spots, blah, blah, blah. But on a grand scale in manufacturing and industry and heavy industrial mining, all those things, the skill sets are very, very unique. And it is very, very difficult to find the appropriate skill sets that match the company's vision, that match the company's culture, and all these things. And what you're doing is so valuable. And I know there's others out there, but I wish there were more. I wish there was more, because me managing hundreds of people in the past and having managers and engineers working for me and things, it's very tough, especially if you're doing it alone. And I just want to say one thing before I move on. You mentioned a bond and the camaraderie of our industry. a lot of people in our industry have done the work. They've
Mhm.
started out as a technician or a PM guy or a janitor or something, and they've done the work. They've built the skill sets. They've put in the time. They've sacrificed a lot. As you know, our industry does not sleep.
Correct.
And they've literally built the world. And when they meet other people who have done those same things, it's like it's kindred spirit, right? It's
Yeah.
like I've known you my whole life, essentially, right? Because of our mutual experience.
Yeah, and the mutual respect that comes with putting in the work. And that's the one thing you can't fake. You can't fake the work. You
Nope.
cannot, there is no shortcut for the work. There are ways to accelerate your progress, but
Sure.
it's really how much work you get out of your day as
Right.
opposed to how many days you've showed up to work. So I think that's a really important differentiator a lot of people miss.
That's right. And I like to say, just piggybacking on that, I like to say, um, it's not about the time, it's
Mhm.
what you've done with that time,
Exactly.
you know?
So yeah,
So,
we agree entirely, and there's ways to get to the bottom of that real quick. So so we're really fortunate to have figured it out and developed a lot of frameworks to help our clients really get a better understanding of who's who.
right. And I love the fact that, Chris and I were talking earlier about his webinar that he's putting
Mhm.
out through
Mhm.
UpKeep on December 7th, it is.
I believe so.
Believe it's December 7th. If Chris will check, he'll tell me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong
I'll
and we'll
double check here.
correct that. But
You
anyway,
are absolutely right. You got it bang on.
ah, got it. Shout out to upkeepers for knowing everything and keeping me straight.
Yeah.
So Chris and I were talking, and the nice thing about progressive reliability is they're able to give you the steps of understanding and a structured process to evaluate candidates, onboard candidates, know the candidate's growth potential. What really makes the candidate tick in relation to the business. And all these other things. So, Chris, if you could, real quick, could you just touch on kind of your webinar that you're going to be putting out for UpKeep?
Yeah, let me talk through kind of some of the philosophies. So we've got the 5 pillars of the talent cycle, and most people only focus on number 1 and number 3. And really, we want to look at the holistic approach. And there's a couple reasons for this. For one, we're not in the business of creating codependency. So we like to come in and solve problems, but we always want to leave a client better than we found them. So we want to arm people with the tools. And the other thing is, the reason people hire us is to actually get employees they can keep and train and grow within their company. For us, we're also on the hook. The companies we work with, if they're chewing up and spitting everybody out, guess what? We're responsible and on the hook for guaranteeing that as well. So
Yep.
we took a step back and said, hey, how do we get out of this? A lot of these recruitment and consulting companies just want to kind of get in to create more and more and more. And we want to see, how can we get in to make sure this department or this site is filled up and settled and stabilized. And so a couple of the numbers behind that, and we were just talking about this kicking off, and I just looked this up today on the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I believe these are October numbers. There's 12.7 million people employed in manufacturing. I know that's not all the industrial customers we're talking about, but just taking a large subset. 12.7 million employed. There's 9.6 million job openings. Now, you want to knuckle that down by, okay, who's actually looking? Well, the average job tenure is 2.7 years. So say a third of those 12.7 are looking for jobs. So that's roughly what, 4 and change million looking for a job across 9.6 million job openings. Then dilute that, without getting too confusing, by who's actually competent.
Right.
And all of a sudden you see there's a big problem out there.
Yes.
And that pulls back to why we're getting out of codependence. There's more than enough work for us to work with the top 3% of organizations out there. We have more than enough to run a fabulous career. Okay. What we want to do is we actually want to go in and find out, how can we make people better? How can we educate them? And how can, as we go about the hiring process, really improve the experience so that people can get in and stay where they
Right.
belong. So that's real high level
Sure.
of So these are some of the topics we're talking about, but more importantly, the underlying why we're doing what we're doing. There is so much opportunity, there's so much need, and there's so many great people out there that we just want to clear the path.
Right. And just for clarity, Chris said in his 5 pillars, 1 and 3. 1 is
You're going to give
application.
away my 5 pillars before my webinar?
No, I'll just say 1 and 3. 1 is application, and 3 is hiring.
3 is hiring. Yeah, most people think get applicants and hire them.
That's so we'll stop right there. You got it. December 7th.
It's all over my website and LinkedIn, man. It's not a big secret. Yeah. So number 1, I'm just teasing. So number 1 is application generation, right? Getting people in. Okay. People completely forget number 2, which is application nurturing. Chances are good your next 3 great hires are sitting in your applicant tracking system today.
Right.
You just don't go, you know what I mean? People don't go through them. You are probably connected on LinkedIn to a few fabulous people who are looking for a job today. And by the way, their profile is not going to say open to work. So there's a nurturing process involved. Then a lot of people think of the interview as a screen out. Well, and I'll go into the statistics a little better on the webinar, but if that screening process is negative, about 57% of people are going to share their negative hiring experience with your company. So this isn't necessarily the way it was 5 or 10 years ago, where it was like, hey, I want to screen through people. Everybody you're screening through is a potential applicant. So that's why we want to talk about not only interview for success in, but you're going to have to interview 7 people. I mean, for us, I think we send 5 to 7 candidates and get a hire. Out there, it's more like 14 to 17. Yeah. So you got a lot of potential people to put your name on the street. So that's one. Then, people think onboarding is a 2-week orientation.
Some none, some 0 orientation.
Some no. Yeah. Here's
your hard hat. Go to work.
Yeah, exactly. So there is that, we call it the honeymoon period, the first 90 days, where somebody, hey, it's a new job, it's bright and shiny, how that goes, what they're telling, what that goes into the market. Somebody's got a lot of, they just left their job. So they have a lot of visibility for your company, what's going on there. That's something we really pay a lot of attention to. And then finally, something no recruiter wants to talk about is retention and ascension. You want to keep these people, you want to raise them up. I mean, one of the first questions we ask when we take on a new role is, why is it open? A lot of times somebody got promoted, somebody did really well, and the frameworks just don't exist internally to get that information out there. So we really do a lot to train our clients in terms of, right, hey, here's the good news.
And, you touched on something a little bit ago, and you said, you talked about education. Mm-hmm. Education is like the building block of raising your life, or raising your, I don't want to say status, but status, right? The education literally brings people out of where they are and puts them to where they want to be. And that education is for the business, right? You can educate the business on the appropriate ways to address applicants, nurture applicants, hire applicants, train and build applicants, right? But even the applicant themselves, being a part of your process, they're being educated, right? Yeah. They're being brought up to speed on why all these things are so important when it comes to taking a job.
And Brian, you mentioned, you touched on a hot point for me. I really wish we could tear down everybody's assumption of education as being an academic setting. Because, let's face it, the word on the street is people have been put into white collar jobs through college education and kept out forever. Well, that college education and that path doesn't really teach skills, right? I mean, this is why
I'm a college dropout, Chris.
Yeah. It took me 10 years to get my undergrad. You know what I mean? Like, I had a little break in between because I wanted to go into business, and I learned way more doing it that way.
Yeah.
Then I took the victory lap, which is another story for another time. But anyway, so the point was, with education, especially in the plant, it goes on all day, every day. And really to understand the little bits and pieces. And I think something our generation has is a lot of the social media tools, Instagram, that can actually be a great education resource. I mean, my YouTube channel is groomed from all sorts of people that I want to learn from. And it's literally feeding me information constantly on what I'm trying to understand. So these algorithms, there's a lot of, you can get educated on these platforms really easily.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also do the same thing in the plant.
Right.
I've got newsletters that I get every week that I never want to miss because there's so much information out there. And just to have that distilled, well, it's the same thing in your plant. Who are the people that are just bleeding out great information, and how's that getting passed on? It doesn't have to be formal. People talk about that working together, kind of learning from osmosis. You can really teach a lot, and that's where the retention ascension process is. It's actually more a matter of breaking down what are we trying to get to, and then how do we get the micro steps on a daily or weekly or quarterly basis to get there.
That's right.
Bit by bit by bit. So it's really what goes into it. And a great CMMS is a great education tool as well. Tell you exactly what to do, how to set it up, right?
That's right.
That's what it's there to do.
That's right. And it's just a wild thing. I have mentees, people that I mentor, who are not college educated, right? And they're tradesmen, they're people who are doing the work on a day-to-day basis. And I love explaining to them that you don't have to have it, right? Is it good and has its place? Of course. But you can be successful and you can grow and drive towards the thing that you want in your career without it. And I'll say one more thing. I have personally gotten those emails looking for jobs that are like, hey, you 150% meet all the criteria, but our director or our VP wants you to have a bachelor's degree in business. And I'm like, what? So I can do the job, but because I don't have something that says I went to school for 4 years, I can't have the job.
And military experience goes.
I have that too.
Way to overcome. There's so much that can be done to overcome, and so we really put our clients to the test when that's something they wanted to bring out. And finally, on the education last piece, because I was just thinking, one of my best friends is a phenomenal fisherman, and I can't think of a single certification he has.
Skills, right?
What I mean? Yeah. So, there's a lot of things that, hey, when your engagement is the best thing, and you can't train engagement, you can't teach the traits. And this is one of the most important aspects of recruiting is traits are untrainable. So when you look at those traits, you can add knowledge to it, but ultimately there's not enough education in the world that overcomes a cultural misfit. And so that's where we talk about culture. It's not barbecue or ping pong tables or any of that kind of nonsense. That's not culture. It's what you reward. Some cultures are spicy and some people like it spicy. That's okay. It's not a bad thing. Everybody has their definition of what the right culture needs to be. It's really what is an environment where a person thrives and keeps them sufficiently challenged.
That's right.
Because that's the other thing that's going on is everybody wants to, they just want to be in a bubble where it's all safe. Like that's not where progress is. Progress always happens at the edge of your comfort level. So how do we stay there and then also make it rewarding enough to keep at it?
Yes. And I call, like, for me, I'm speaking for how I fit, and I fit very well in meritocracy style cultures where you are graded on your performance, your performance, no hiding in the group, no nothing, your performance. I love that. And that comes from being in the military because I was graded on my performance and I was responsible for my team's performance. Right. And I love that.
You were held accountable,
yes,
extreme measures for that as well.
Yes. And going back to you and your team, is like, take us through like your process for, you don't have to go soup to nuts, right? But like when you're trying to link a candidate to a company, like I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, there's probably a lot you need to know about the company as well as just it seems like there's a lot you need to know, maybe more so than the applicant.
I don't want to scare anybody, but we have an 88-point onboarding process. And that you are never going to derive from a job description. So it's on the short end, when we know a client and we're taking on another role for them, it's at least 15 minutes to really get an understanding. This is, again, knowing everything about the client. A new client first role, it's usually about 40 minutes. We don't go through all 88, but we have a bank to draw from because we really want to know everything about the company. More importantly, having these frameworks, there are so many assets that our clients have, and they're just not communicating because they don't have the tools to do so. And that's really our job, is to communicate to the open market, here's what's going on. So when we talk to somebody about a role, we want to understand why they're looking. But you can't just stop at the surface. And a lot of times what happens is people kind of, well, let's face it, you want to make a match, right? It's dating. So you want to make a match, and you put, oh, this is what I want. And you see whatever matches with what you want. And we need to actually go through, it's a lot more in depth, because the breakups are far more expensive and far more cumbersome here in our world. And you know what I mean? Admittedly, it's really important. Like this is an important social thing. So we, with our candidates, really get under the hood of what they're looking for, what they like, what they don't like, and make sure they have opinions about what works and what doesn't, what has in the past, what they want to get. The other thing is we've created our own job search roadmap, which is another document we use with all of our candidates, so that our candidates are equipped to properly interview the company. Okay, again,
Very
for
important.
us, we want to make sure that these hires really work. So within reliability, we have a framework where we took 3 years of every single interview, what happened, what went right, what didn't, what was the reason somebody didn't move forward with a role. And we just built a document out of it so that you can find out, okay, what percentage of your work is reactive versus proactive? You know, what are we doing? And so getting into that is really, really important. But again, it's about getting the right questions asked and getting a real thorough understanding.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on, so I guess I'll just preface this question is, when I've hired people or I've interviewed people, they liked, one of the things that the feedback to our talent acquisition team and stuff like that was always that they liked that I had done their job. Okay. And when I work for somebody, generally I like to know, I mean, I have a niche expertise, right? So not everyone's going to know all the things that we know as reliability and professionals, right? But I want to know that the person I'm going to work for has a general understanding of the high concepts of maintenance, reliability, industry, things like that, because I want to make sure that we can speak the same language and they understand the nuance associated with the position, right?
Yeah.
How often do you find that the business may be an awesome fit for a candidate, but the person that person's reporting to is not the best fit because they have a disconnect in the function?
Well, this has been kicked around a lot, and people don't quit the company, they quit their manager, and that can often take place. So it's really, that's where we talk about culture, the team, who you're working with, what's going on through them. Now, you need to be adaptable, and that's, I think, the thing that cuts through all of that is, what is the real vision and is it encouraged? So if you have a bunch of people rowing in a bunch of different directions, we know what that looks like.
Right.
But even there may be a personality dynamic that exists, that within the same culture, with everybody rowing in the same direction, is quite simple to overcome, because we're on the same mission, and that little bit of friction is good. And that's kind of where I think about, back in my formative years, the best teachers weren't the people that I liked the most and just enabled me to get away with whatever I want. They were the ones that were able to push back.
Sure.
And I could learn from. Those are they're people that you may not want to call today and have a drink with, but you learn the most from them.
Yeah.
So I think, there needs to be a little bit of friction in the dynamic, or else you're just not, you don't have something to push against and grow against.
Sure. That's a good point.
However, there is a threshold of what's right for that, and that's different for every person.
Sure.
So that's where, anybody saying, oh, this is perfect, anybody that comes into a job that says, oh my God, this is going to be great, it's going to be the best job ever. Hold on. Let's look some more. We want to find the places, where's the friction, because that's where the growth takes place.
Right.
So that's what we need to understand.
It's funny you say that. I had a boss at a job when I started out as a maintenance engineer. I moved up to equipment maintenance manager. Then I became the director of maintenance and reliability and all these things. And one of the people that I reported to, he really, really helped me hone communication and perception, and to the point where when I would send emails that he was copied to, he would either call or text me and say, you spelled this word wrong. And I would always be like, why does it matter? What does it matter? Like, it's what, and he really helped me understand that it's not about the word. It's about the investment of your time into what you're doing and who your audience is. And that it's very important from a perceptual standpoint for people to understand that you are meaning what you say, saying what you mean, being educated on the things that you're saying, and doing things correctly. And now to this day, I make sure, I'm a terrible speller, full disclosure, I make sure that I do those things right.
So this is exactly something, when I started learning how to drive fast cars, I was taught that slow is fast and fast is slow. You see a car sliding all over the place. Yeah, they get, they're putting the power down, they're going everywhere. Well, their lap times can suck. You've got to have traction. You've got to be focused. You've got to have the right line. You've got to be dialed in. And that's not, showing off in a parking lot. That's the actual rhythm of doing things the right way and the effective way. And it looks a little slower, but sometimes going 8% slower to get rid of those errors and those penalties, is everything. That's where the win is.
That's right.
So that is a balance for sure.
Right. So Chris, we're coming up on time, man. I just want to thank, that was fast, right?
Quick, man. Yeah. Great.
I just want to thank you so much. And I stand by what I said and what you're doing and connecting people to the appropriate business and building this community or bench of professionals that we can help our industry with is extremely valuable. I know that I appreciate it. I know there's a lot of people who are going to reach out to you that appreciate it. One last thing, how do we get a hold of you, Chris?
So LinkedIn is a really great place. So if you just put my name in there, I'm the only Chris Pepin in manufacturing. So that's a great way to do it. Directly, you want to reach out, you have any questions, if you want to grab that document that I mentioned, the job search roadmap, I'm happy to send it to you. Just my initials, cp@proreli.com, PRORELI. That's super fast. I manage that inbox. And so that's a great way to get a hold of me too. Anything that we mentioned here, I'm happy to send along to anybody who's curious about it.
Perfect.
So
thank you. And remember, Chris's webinar is December 7th. Hopefully this episode will be out before that. If not, it's going to be put out through UpKeep's messaging and LinkedIn, all that. So it's easy to find Chris. I was watching his videos actually this morning on LinkedIn. So Chris,
2 a week, two videos a week, multiple comments a day. We're really active on there. We're gonna we put out all of our content. Everything we do, I'm putting out there. So there's no secrets to this. It's what we do is just like what everybody else does. It's the application. It's doing the work every single day and putting out there. There's no big secret to talent. This is the great thing. It's just about putting it all together into a framework and having the discipline to follow through. That's the really big differentiator that we have, and we're happy to share it with anybody. We want to get you as far as we can. Okay.
Awesome, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. We will be talking again, I am sure. And have a great rest of your day, Chris. And I really appreciate you being on the UpKeep Pledge podcast.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Brian.
Thanks, man. Take it easy.
You got it.